279, tactical crouch. Everything's on fire. But Yiska has found the One Piece. He is now sailing east blue. He's on the Grand Line. He's looking for whatever the hell you One Piecers do look at.
I found
Overwatch.
I found it. It isn't real.
Well,
it isn't real.
It's not
That's
real.
fake.
Oh.
I'm
Was
sorry.
it the friends you made along the way?
No, it was all a fucking lie.
Oh, not One Piece fans, just huffing glue and much like our copium hopium person, right?
Oh, there's an allegoric value here in the sense of the Overwatch League as well. Maybe we should have never left the port.
Possible.
Sip coffee.
Possible. Yes, we're here. The Jacob Wolf report is out. We will be talking about it, so strap in. But we also have some fun player moves, so tune into that as well. Other than that, Yiska has also been doing kind of God's work, interviewing GMs, and maybe there's more there. We'll have to see. But before we get into teasing all of this and getting into the dumpster fire, or not so dumpster fire that is the Overwatch esports space, Yiska, what have you been up to?
I mean, really trying to make sure that I have eyesight next year. And also, a bunch of planning in terms of, content for the season. Hung out a little bit in Custis' shed last night because he was watching the panel. So, yeah, just having a good time. How about you?
Not too terribly much. I've been baking a little bit, which has been kind of fun. Made some muffins. That was kind of chill. Anything happening in Custis chat? Did he have an interesting take on the GM panel?
No, it was good. I feel like we're having this cathartic moment where everyone is just saying the shit that they believed and didn't want to necessarily say. And yeah, Jacob was in the chat and Liz was in the chat, so it was fun hanging out, having a little shared moment of suffering. Even though it's not as bad, we'll get to it. It's not that bad yet. It's not all doom, but yeah,
it's not good. I think we can agree.
It's not good, but in some sense, it is also for some of us that have known behind the scenes. I feel like it's some people like this move. Let's say that. You want me to elaborate why?
No, hold on. We'll get there. We'll get there. But first, before we jump into the talk of the town at the moment, we have to thank the patrons and our Patreon producers and our YouTube members. So for $2.79, we give a special thanks to Avril, Vista Baby, Battlecrab, Refund Bean, Bronzebot, Boohow, Picasso, Chris, R34444, Kasha67, Nolshin, Porchas Sammy, Rexane, and our YouTube members, I am DRW, Brother, Adam L, Sagi Fumi, Ice Am Jello, Fire Element 6, AK, and Chris R. So help me understand why this is a good move. Why in the world is teams lawyering up a good thing?
Okay, so as you can imagine, that this increases leverage that teams, or at least teams that are part of this collective bargaining agreement, have upon the league. It has felt like a little bit that, and let me do this disclaimer here. I am actively trying to say virtually nothing that happens behind the scenes. There's no hints in what I'm saying, and if I'm telling you something that happened behind the scenes, I'll outright mark it as this has been the talk of the town for a while, right? Okay. I just don't want to, we do this a lot with player movements where it's kind of fun to poke, nobody's really losing their shit, nothing is vitally wrong with us discussing or hinting or whatever.
The legality realm.
This is serious, and I don't want to be the pirate on the stand at some trial or whatever, right?
You want to be...
Right.
Yeah, Roger, whatever.
Speaking of trial, this is also a thing that I feel like is a little bit overblown. This doesn't necessarily mean that a lawsuit is yet commencing.
Okay, and that was my first question.
This is this is specifically in the wording, at least, that Jacob has put out, is that this is a collective bargaining agreement organized through this British law firm that just allows the organizations to apply pressure to the Overwatch League, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that legal action has to immediately be taken. This is a bunch of, like, in some ways, it's a way to build up leverage, and others would say it's bluffing. It's not bluffing if you're actually coming down to a lawsuit, because there are several ways what can happen or come from this after, right? The problem, realistically, is that there have been just a bunch of issues in terms of the monetization. Some of it we have covered in the GM panel, where we still don't have sustainable revenue streams. We haven't heard anything about a new broadcasting deal. It's highly questionable if we're getting one at all, especially in this market, or if they're ever coming back. We are having sponsorship issues where we have, like, TeamSpeak, TopDeck, and Butterfinger, even though Butterfinger probably is the only one that's really, like, live on the broadcast, is probably the only one that's paying some sort of money. We were already in a position where last year, like, according to I think it was a New York Times report, we're getting a 1 million revenue share per team. That was conditional on the YouTube broadcasting deal, right? That falls off, and you can assume that is a major source of that income, at least. Just like if you extrapolate what that YouTube deal was set to be, and then you halve that and take the little bit of a chunk for Blizzard themselves, and like, it works out that the majority of that rev share was probably coming from the broadcasting deal, right? Also, keep in mind, we didn't even really have other sponsors. Butterfinger came in pretty late, so presumably, unless there were additional stipends, most of it came from the rev share deal, from the broadcasting deal. If that is now gone, we have a problem with revenue streams. So, Grant of the Justice, I think VP of Esports is his title, said, like, we need alternative revenue streams. Go sell. Go get us sponsors, or provide additional revenue streams, something like, just to give you an example, something like MTX and skins, right? So that could be, for instance, something that the collective bargaining agreement pushes for, where they can say, okay, and this, once again, speculation, this is not that I know behind the scenes that this is their plan, that what they want to do. Like, I'm just giving the audience examples of what it could be, right? Truthfully, I don't know what they're doing. So, some revenue streams that the owners can believe in going forward, right?
Sure, of course.
Like, the revenue has to come from somewhere. It's unlikely to come from broadcasting rights, just like looking through the industry, and that also applies to not just esports, but like streamers at large. Even streamers are not getting these deals anymore, right?
Sure.
So the landscape has changed in that regard, and we haven't kept up with our technology and our strategies to find revenue from the fandom. And of course, like, I assume a lot of things came together. I assume that, or I guess I can say that, like, there were there are constantly, like, ownership meetings, and they're getting, drafts suggested, what the next season will look like, and, like, a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of millions of factors that probably eventually led to this, right? It is interesting to hear that Overactive Media is apparently, like, the leading organization, also because in the messaging they were pretty high on Blizzard, at least from Adam Adamu's point of view. That said, it's not that confusing if you consider that they're one of the publicly traded teams, right? Like, they have some responsibility towards their shareholders, right?
Okay.
They also have quarterly earnings reports. I'm not a business person, but that's publicly available. You can look at what OAM is valued at. You can subtract the LAC slot that they had. I think the Misfit slot was reported to be sold for, I think, around 40 million euros, I think, or USD. I'm not sure what it was. I don't know. Like, I did some napkin math. The slot probably depreciated. Like, both the CDL and the Overwatch League franchise. I think I came down to. Don't name me. I'm reluctant. Just do the math yourself. But from what I could tell from their financials, the slot has depreciated from the 20 million already. Keep in mind, Toronto Defiant is a expansion team, and those allegedly have paid higher amounts, right?
At a premium.
You know, like other goals that they could be pursuing is exactly getting rid of these payments going forward, even though they were already deferred. But you cannot plan if, like, there's this weight above your head that you still got to drop a cool 20 million on this franchise, right? Like, there's just no way you can feasibly argue that, right? So there's something has to be done, especially when you look at across the industry and see how, you know, Valorant is moving and actually giving people, like, it's a different agreement because they don't really have ownership of those slots. So it's fundamentally different. And I've always said this, that even like the LEC or LCS franchise slots, the price comparison there, it's not that interesting to me simply because I don't know what you're getting for that, right? Like, that was never the reported part, so you can't really judge both those offers against each other. In hindsight, you now got to say, like, apparently it's not great business. Otherwise, you wouldn't see teams start to collectively bargain against the league, right? Yes. I'm not sure if in a priori, so to speak, like the deal was sweeter in some sense. Like, maybe you had a higher rev share percentage, or there's a lot of levers where that deal, like what you're getting from the Overwatch League, is better than what you're getting from Riot. Once again, I have no idea if that's true. It could be the case, and that could have justified the franchise slot price. If that was actually the questionable, right? So, okay. So we're now at a point where, like, Jacob, I think, had a figure in there. Some have paid a cool 16 million for everything combined at this point, right? And we also don't know. Like, it says a majority. We don't know which teams are in there, right? So this is, especially if I'm overactive media, like, I have one asset that constantly appreciates. That's the LEC slot. Yes. I think that went from 19 million in 2019 to like 41 or whatever it was reported, and like by the time Misfit sold. That's quite a bit.
To jump in minorly, doing some like side, research on, what Team Heretics bought the Misfit slot for. I believe Deserto is saying anywhere from 45 to 50 USD.
Right.
And then Upcomer is also reported 34 to 36. So again, it's definitely appreciated, but
yes.
At what size?
Conversion and whatnot. But you get the idea. Like, the percentages there are pretty widely different. But yeah, right? Bottom line is, the LEC slot definitely appreciated.
Yes.
If you subtract the value of that LEC slot from whatever OAM is worth as a business as a whole, it looks like the CDL slot and from my, once again, like, dude, I may be said in the wrong lecture once in a business course, right? Okay. That's the extent of my education in that regard. But it looked to me that there was a number significantly lower than the buy-in cost for the CDL and the Overwatch League squad. So, okay, that's like, they have a responsibility, I imagine, towards their shareholders. So it doesn't surprise me. I think that's probably what they should do at this point, especially if they're not confident in whatever the league has put forward, right? Now, there's a million bajillion things that those guys could ask from the league. Right.
Okay.
What we can be sure of is, if it was easy to get out of this league, people would have done it. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
That's almost a given how some of those franchises have moved, like Immortals with Valiant. Right. Like, if they, right, like, if they could have in some ways, I think, right. Also don't want to speculate. Maybe not. Maybe they've just find that they hope to recuperate and probably are turning a profit based on the rev share that they're getting, and paying none of that to the players.
Paying who? Paying who?
Or not none of that, but like, once again, also like the Valiant stuff. Everything is going on this week, Joe. Like, bringing this all into right.
You want to talk about netties next? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I assume that's certainly like, one aspect.
It's a piece of the puzzle somewhere in the cog that is Overwatch Esports. Yes,
it's I imagine the broadcasting rights, the lack of sponsorships, potentially like what kind of other expected costs there could be through the whatever we're doing and whatnot. The likelihood that whatever we're planning is going to succeed. All of that, I assume, plays a role. Now, of course, why this is not absolutely doom is because it is a lever. It's not a kill me now, at least as Jacob has reported it, right? It could be eventually turning into that. That's not the signal I'm taking, right?
Okay.
It's we're getting together, we're sending a strong message that you can't just sit here in lethargic, like, do nothing or not do a lot, do enough, let's say, until like the Microsoft merger has emerged or whatever happens. The big thing for our ecosystem has already happened. That is Overwatch 2. It happened, and we're not like seeing the growth that we want, right? At least, like, I would say that's what I would be thinking, right? So, I don't. That's why I personally like I like that we're now getting a little bit more radical about this and add pressure to the league, because I agree with strategies like the MTX integrations going forward, right? That's something that we've had so long in other esports. Like you could argue, and it's not MTX integration necessarily with CS:GO that saved it. It was the skins at large, and then they brought the teams in later at a later point via the skins that dropped in the majors, and they had like cool capsules where you could like get player signatures and you could slap them onto your weapons, and then like there was stake of every viewer to get the pick'ems right, to hope that the stickers you had, the team won, because that would appreciate on the market. Of course, to do that in 2023 is very hard, but we got to push the envelope a little bit, is what I hope for, right? So, I think when this hit, I was 0% surprised, personally. And I hope it applies adequate pressure onto Activision Blizzard, because presumably this merger is $69 billion. Presumably this is the Overwatch League, but a lot of these franchises that maybe are also in the lawsuit, we don't know. It's at least OAM, if Jacob, or I assume Jacob knows absolutely, like, I trust Jacob to have gotten everything right here. Like, OAM has 2 franchises, right, in Activision Blizzard leagues. They also have the CDL. So this is CDL is in a different position for sure, but you're not exactly keeping or making friends by messing up the one project, right?
Of course, yeah.
So, yeah, I feel like what is important to me was like when this dropped, it's like, this is the end, isn't it? Oh my god! Like I'll start digging and whatnot. I'm not sure if it's that strong yet. Like, we're very likely to get a season 6 just based on like this is set in stone pretty much, right? Like,
people have already spent money. I don't expect anybody to go on strike just yet.
Yeah, that type of stuff. And to me personally, and this is my personal my personal opinion, I feel like for as much damage franchising has done or could have done, we don't live in that timeline where we could feasibly prove that we could have been this great esports in a third-party system. I'm not convinced that's true. I'm not sure if Overwatch is that game. But at this point, the franchising and the lock that you have on these franchises via their contracts or via their franchise agreements actually keeps it alive.
Yeah.
Right? Like it actually, we have a salary floor, which is you got to pay for the duration of the season. You got to pay an annualized rate of 50 for whatever it is. And that's the salary floor. You got to have a coach. You don't have to pay housing anymore, whatever. Like that's the and you got to show up basically, right?
Yep.
That's what we're saying. And if that wasn't here, I'm not sure like what would happen to Overwatch esports. And I'm also one, like I feel like a lot of people, because the herd has been on this, especially like professionals working here for such a long time, that it feels pretty torturous and they just want it to be over. I wouldn't wish for that, right? Like,
no, think of a world. To Yiska's point, to your point right there, because I think I want to unpack some of that because that was very information dense. But let's start here, right? If we're to take this thought experiment of what if tomorrow we unfranchised, Blizzard just gave third parties a stipend to run all the events forever, Alienware, monthly Melee style. If Activision Blizzard can't finance,
you mean license, right? Not stipends, right?
Sure, whatever. Yeah. License out. I'm even thinking of like having, in a world where like Blizzard actually pays people to run their esports for them, right? Like maybe stipend isn't the right word, but it wouldn't happen. Exactly. Right. If the developer themselves can't find suitors to pay for the esport, what makes you think a third party is going to find suitors to pay for the esport? Yeah. It's just not going to happen. Alienware doesn't. There's no. Gun to head. I do not see that like an Alienware monthly Melee happening again. And if it did, it wouldn't last very long because we're, like Jacob said, entering an esports winter, right? Nobody wants to spend money right now. Nobody's looking at this and being like, oh boy, I'm really hot for Overwatch 2 right now. Yes, it's better than what it was in Overwatch 1, at its tail end, 100%. Nobody's arguing that. But like you kind of hinted at in that little dossier that you dropped, we haven't seen the growth that we were hoping for, right? We were hoping for Overwatch 2 to be the big shot in the arm with the sponsors come back. Yes, we got Butterfinger at the playoffs. Awesome. Great. Hopefully they continue. There has been radio silence when it comes to anything else moving forward. And then you look at the GM panel and you look at Jacob Wolf's report. It doesn't seem like things have been progressing. At least that's my take from a lot of different data points. Drives me to the conclusion things aren't necessarily going to plan, right? So no, I don't think, to your point, I don't think if we just stop franchising today, we kill the Overwatch League, let's just go back to what it was. There is no going back to what it was. That doesn't exist anymore. That can't happen. This is not the hot, in the cultural zeitgeist. You have 4-year-olds and 10-year-olds running around the Kellogg cereal aisle going, oh, that's Tracer. I love Lucio's. Like that doesn't, no, we're past that. Nobody's wanting to spend money on this game because if they did, the developer would be able to get it, right? I don't see that happening. Number one. Number two, I wanted to kind of unpack some of the comments that you made regarding like the legality of like suing, right? Because it seems like there's a big difference between lawyering up to sue the Overwatch League and collectively bargaining against. So to recap, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, what you're saying is that the teams, the franchises, the select number of franchises, again, Jacob Wolf used the term majority, doesn't mean all, just a majority of them, have put a law firm on retainer to try to leverage more good stuff for the teams. Is that correct?
For now.
Whether that,
and there's,
for now.
I mean, that is my reading of this.
Okay.
And then there's like a multitude of things that I could see happening, right? Like from,
sure.
what you basically discussed, like all the pressure points or levers you could pull in order to get this card out of the mud, really, right? Or like, if not, that's also something that definitely could happen. Like there's there's some responsibility towards teams to have legal representation in the case that this doesn't make sense, right? So there's a ton of things that this communicates. It's not all doom. It's not a great thing. You don't never want that.
No, it's definitely not a good thing.
It's actually like in some sense the ultimate monkey paw curl. It's like we want collective bargaining, please, or not for the teams. We wanted it for the players.
Yeah.
So
that was a couple of the reactions that I got from some friends that was just like, oh, but the players won't. And it's like, well, maybe there's something there that can be discussed or explored. But to kind of continue off of that, where it's like, okay, this doesn't necessarily mean suing. This just means that the teams are looking to gain some leverage, maybe cut some costs, maybe to forgive any kind of slot,
get more stipends, whatever it is, right?
Exactly.
Like I have the strong feeling that the league is just, and probably rightfully convinced that because, and this is something that Grant said, is like, you have all the broadcast assets, you have the production, everything, like make a product that people want to invest sponsorship dollars for, and if you can't, then you got to find another revenue model how we get fans to subsidize this esport in some sense, right? Like you got to get.
I mean, that's almost impossible, right? Like that's the $1 million question: is how do the fans subsidize your esport? I feel like that's been the question on people's lips since 2011.
Dude, like if this league could TI like that's more than enough money, right? Like if they got, okay, maybe not 2022 TI, that was historically low, but everything before that just kept ramping up. And I would say, like from what I recall, the last 3 years, like those were huge successes, and that could have absolutely bankrolled the Overwatch League, right? Like many times over, actually. I think one of them was what was the total prize pool? Was it over 60?
I think the last one that I remember was like above 40 million.
Yeah,
and that's just like the what do they call it in Dota? The like. Yeah. They bought the battle pass and it goes to the big prize pool and it adds to the players, but that's not looking at like how much money and like attention and
40 million. Okay, I had it wrong in mind.
Yes. Yeah. Sure. Regardless, like it's such a great thing for Valve to do because it makes this like I would imagine you can take like numbers like that and all like the data around, what the TI, and God forbid, leave it in the comments below on what I'm trying to say, right? Like their version of the TI battle pass. There's a word for it and it's killing me. Like what you can use that data for. Yes, the compendium. You can sell that to like sponsors and stuff. And that's probably got to be like a strong driving force of like why that's so successful, right? I guess if we want to get into that, it's like, okay, if we're all basically coming out from under the esports rug and saying, yes, it has been just a big marketing experiment all along. We're all on the same page now. When is Blizzard going to, and I guess Activision as well, you can't really say one without the other. When is that going to meet, the train car, right? Like when are we going to actually approach this with the resources and the assets needed to make this a marketing experience? Because since Jeff Kaplan came out and teased Blackwatch, the PvE cool, game mode, it feels like two separate entities instead of one big conglomerate under an umbrella, right? Like the Overwatch League feels like a redheaded stepchild to the Overwatch experience, when I feel like this is a stage that they could utilize to either like reverse promote where you're promoting. Go ahead.
I'm sometimes skeptical if that's true. Like, I feel like if the Overwatch League was completely inconsequential to development, we probably wouldn't have gotten Overwatch 2 standalone. PvP.
I agree there, but I struggle to see many, and it's a big example, to be fair. I'm not going to like poo-poo like the decoupling of PvE and PvP. I do think like we played a role in that, but that feels more like a hindrance to Team 4 than necessarily like a utilization of this tiny niche product that, we've built over the course of 5-6 years, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like we're utilizing the esports machine or lawnmower that we have to really effectively sell anything or drive people to play Overwatch. I struggled with the idea of like this being a strong marketing tool when we don't. It feels so separated, and that's for a number of reasons. But it doesn't feel like Activision Blizzard is doing anything about it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I feel like that's almost like from day one. I felt like the community management of that was pretty weak as well. Like it starts with the Reddit, like.
Yes, the Reddit's a big one. Like off the jump.
Like the Riot just takes charge of that and then installs their guys onto these
Which
Reddits,
isn't
right?
a great thing either, but
I mean, it works for them, right? Like
it works for them, yeah.
So like there is no esports content on the Overwatch. Now, like it's really hard to say what the butterfly effect of that could have been years down the line. I will say some of the content I did back then that ended up on the front page of our Overwatch is still some of the most engaged I've had in Overwatch at large, right? Like, if you could have educated this audience based on that and always had, like, at least some parts of the front page always a little bit about esports, not majority or whatever, then I feel like you could have dragged a lot more people over. I also, like, I understand that a lot of people here want to have a fandom that's not necessarily from the player base and they want to unlock that. Feels like a terribly ill-suited game to do that. But maybe it's not even about the game. It's more about the experience. But the experience is also not something you couldn't get anywhere else. And every sports game, like, just think about, like, if I'm someone from, let's say, a local, I don't know, some U.S. American city that has an Overwatch team, I'm still competing with the experience of the actual sport, right? Like, if I'm a person that doesn't care and doesn't play either of those games, then I'm choosing the better experience. Now, what am I going to choose? There's more dimensions, but two would be, like, what's more entertaining for me to watch? And what's the social situation like? What's the atmosphere? Which people am I with there? Are those my friends? And I also feel like we haven't really taken charge of the social structure of how people organize their friend groups incredibly well, right? Like the fan clubs, and that, once again, that can't all be on the league. And then, on the teams. And then also another thing is, like, I still feel like we are not pushing the envelope enough. In my mind, and this is something where I think I disagree more than also the panel, but I didn't want to push it terribly because I'm out there, and that's as the moderator. Host, I shouldn't post like try to force some fringe opinion. But if it was to me, I would go way more harder on virtual spaces and organizing virtual spaces where the vast majority of my audience engages and try to find cool integrations. Dude, the fact that, once again, this is just like one of the examples. The fact that we have to sit there and go 2 times check so we all can sit in voice and see the big play at the same time is fucking, like, I feel like I'm back in 2005 in my mom's apartment.
Yes.
Trying to, like, sync up the Winamp so I can talk to my friends about whatever is happening in Warcraft 3. Right? Like, this is crazy.
I agree. It's incredibly archaic. I just don't know if Activision Blizzard is that company that is going to create, like, a proprietary environment, especially if we're talking about actual digital spaces. Maybe not in this,
but, like, that's the new thing. Like, Riot is this so often, right? Like, they corner the co-streaming market. They see co-streaming as a thing, then they signal boost it because they see it as a new avenue to push the game. I'm sure they're probably already working on virtual integrations down the line that we're going to see fruition. Like, all of what we're experiencing is a direct result of like, bad long-term planning. The fact that we don't have any revenue streams that aren't broadcasting deals, some like T-Sports boomer shit that already, like, is is on the way out seemingly, is nuts. And then basically all the decisions, like how the development cycle of this game was generally, like how we're not really trying to foster like an environment where the average Overwatch player is more competitive, not putting like these carrots into the ranked experience, so I can say like I want to grind there and want to be like noticeably like creating hierarchies where people think competitively. No, this is the wholesome like esport with the funny characters where
we're still growing out of that.
Where somehow like even the evil people are like scruffy and whatnot, and like it's not. That's not the. You can do that. You just can't build an esports on that. No, you have to have a different trajectory from that develops away from that. You probably need Team 4 cannot be the only thing that is working on this team. Like you would have almost needed a subdivision that is exclusively doing stuff for esports. That's doing all the stats, maybe the stat integrations, the replay viewer integrations. That shouldn't have been like such a side thing, right? It should have direct communications with the pro players based on balance. You should have these integrations of MTX. Like they should have in the hirings rush that they did. They should have gotten even more artists. Yes, it's going to slow down your development cycle because you need to train these people, but that's if you think long term, you start hiring these people in 2019, get them on, those are your esports guys, and they're pumping MTX stuff.
Sure.
Right? Like this, even if you think you're going to get broadcasting deals forever and ever and ever, you still do this because that's just like much more likely to make you money based on everything you've seen. Like I cannot like imagine someone from internally in the company comes to you and goes like, yeah, what about MTX integrations? And the guy that has to decide that goes, that doesn't sound very fun. Imagine that person sitting in a room seeing how NFTs explode. And they're like, no, wait, what?
Exactly.
That has value? I don't understand. Like, it doesn't inherently, but skins very obviously do. Everyone understands it. Your loot boxes should have demonstrated that towards you. And, like, every other esports has demonstrated that towards you. You should have seen that in CS. I don't know, when did they get skins? Like 2016 or something? 15?
Skins in Counter-Strike Global Offensive? I thought it was like early 2014, 15. No?
Didn't it come out in 13? No, that might be
wrong. Look, you continue your diatribe.
But like, I feel like this is not even pushing the envelope. This is just like basic competitive analysis, looking where the revenue streams are going. Everyone is cranking out crazy skins. Fortnite is perfecting that. Like by this time that we're getting this battle pass, it's already like it always feels like an outdated system that probably isn't going to survive the future of gaming either, right? Like we cannot be so late to these parties. Like someone's got to innovate some shit. Like when we had the virtual stadium that came in,
sure,
or like the public, the audience, like. Where we tried something.
It was a cute idea.
I don't know. I feel like every 50 episodes on this podcast, I bring this up as like one time where we finally had something that pushed the envelope a little bit. Whoever the person is that suggested that, I want more ideas out of that, guys. It doesn't matter that it didn't work. Just try shit, right? Like... You gotta.
Well, that's difficult. Nobody's making any money, so how do you try stuff in something that's failing? I understand the plight of
the million they paid for DJ Khaled. They could have probably gotten like 3 developers into a room just for the fun of it and just shoot.
I agree. And to be to the CS:GO point, August 13th, 2013, the update added cosmetic weapon finishes or skins to the game. So, yes, 2013. And then obviously it took off with the marketplace and whatnot. Right. But I want to echo the frustrations that you have, because this isn't something, especially when you're coming from the realm or the attack vector of, social hierarchies and like kind of the ladders that you want to climb, as my niece breaks something in the other room. this isn't something that Blizzard themselves is like foreign to, right? Like coming from your neck of the woods in the past, World of Warcraft, everybody wants to play PvP to get the rank 1. You get special rewards, you get exclusive rewards. It's a social cue to the public to say, wow, that person, whoever they are, got a crazy achievement. And you can see this demonstrated by, the mount that they ride or the title that they have or whatever, what have you, a weapon enchant. Like this is something from one of the biggest franchises of all time, dude. That is in your company.
The thing is, look, from an idealistic point of view, I love that. Like, I love that you think the game should just be the one thing that you play it for, and it's all good, and we shouldn't play these FOMO things, and we shouldn't try to, like, compete against the liquid crack that's TikTok, that's analyzing your, like, neural pathways in order to maximize dopamine secretion. You're up against that, though. That's the multipolarity trap. Everyone has to now compete against that shit, or you die. That's you're really... As the ethical actor and as the head honcho in charge, you have to say, I'm going to make it 0.5% more moral. I'm going to stay in competition with these others. I'm just going to make it slightly better. Because the alternative is to die and have, like, impact 3 people's lives on my squeaky clean morals, and you have, like, from an effectiveness point of view, done jack shit. Or you, like, be my guest, reinvent the wheel like in the most idealistic way, but get people bought into, like, whatever you're doing. Like maybe you can reinvent the wheel, and it's like maybe you have the craziest idea. Be my guest, but like to be on the competitive analysis, especially like a company like Blizzard, whose reputation is they take an idea and then they make it better than their competitors, to a degree that has been the idea of Overwatch as well, right?
Well,
where are we now?
Yes.
Where are we taking the ideas of others and are improving upon them? We're at best are getting within 90% of their performance in everything we're putting out, right? Like the one thing that Overwatch has going for it, I think, like, and this is where I have to talk outside my personal experience, I think the lore is well loved, and I think the polish of this game is also otherworldly, right? Those are our draws.
Well, that, and I think that they have, like, a corner on the market of, like, the hero FPS, meets MOBA genre, where there isn't another game that even, like, challenges them. And maybe that's a bad thing, right? Maybe it's a bad thing.
Maybe there's no market for that, yeah.
That could be as well, but I don't know. I feel
that's the thing. Think about every other developer, right? Like they jumped onto the BR train pretty early, and the earlier they jumped on it, the more successful they rode that wave. Like Overwatch tried to take an approach from a game that was practically already dead.
That's true. Again, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but you're saying that, like, they're taking, like, the bones of Team Fortress 2 and building on top of it this brand new, fancy, theme park. However, I have to, my historian brain needs you to also go back to all the other failed Overwatch copies, the Paladins, the Battleborns. Like, everybody tried to make an Overwatch. Like, there were plenty of Overwatch-esque games that went absolutely nowhere. So, like, yes, there was a gold mine there. There was this rush west when Overwatch was, debuting, and it was as hot as it was. There was a chase after it, but we really haven't gone anywhere since then, right? I agree with you that, like, we're at, like, a 90%, efficacy when you compare to, some of these other, like, chart topper-esque games that are kind of running the space, and all of our tertiary systems and our secondary, monetization models are all playing behind the 8 ball. Sadly, that's how Blizzard has always been. At least I can speak with experience on that, and I feel like you can too, and I think you said as much. We are like a refinement. This is a refinement developer. They take things, they refine it, they polish it up, they have a good idea. They have an eye for good ideas. but it seems like, especially when it comes to monetization and like really, like we mentioned many shows back, putting like a really spicy carrot on a stick is difficult to them because they were this team 4 seems to still be built on the idea that we're still like the moral police, we're the moral, high guard, that we're not going to, give like the rank 5, the top players any kind of reward. We're not going to incentivize people to kind of chase after anything. For what? I think the only speculation for me, at least, is we're still kind of playing in the old Kaplan era. Like, it's for the love of the game, friends.
Yeah.
It can't work these days. And if you want it to be that, then let's just be chess. Like,
chess
is
really inherently more. No, it's inherently more competitive, right? Like,
no, it is, but you see what I mean.
The interesting thing is that I feel like if you look at what Activision and their Call of Duty series especially is doing, they are way better at exactly what I want them to do than Overwatch is. So, for instance, we found out proximity chat is very fun. They kept messing with the formula. Dude, like those voice chats, like I know it's a hotbed of toxicity, but like that's the risk, and it just enriches the experience, right? Then they take they see, they took the battle royale. Like we're pretty late to the market with Warzone. They still got a respectable amount of players onto that, and then now they're taking the Tarkov route and trying to iterate on that, right? Like that's the type of stuff where I want to see, like, can someone do it better, right? Like those guys, because absolutely that loot shooter, like hardcore experience, is technical trash. Tarkov is an absolute shithosing of coding, right? Like the amount of bugs in this game is crazy. And that's true for almost every, like, they don't get me started on DayZ and whatnot. And if you can get like an AAA studio on this and solve these issues and have DMZ be crisp, that's an opportunity. Where's our Overwatch opportunity? Why is
our opportunity is capture the flag, but
no, our opportunity is to go, oh yeah, Left 4 Dead was good. Let's do something like that with PvE. That's once again a dead genre that didn't go anywhere. Why are we not taking on ideas of the things that are popping off and going like? And I guess let's bring it back a little bit to the discussion. Like Brad had a comment. Someone said like Brad for commissioner, and then he basically riffed off of that. He just said like we're now in a position where the commissioner has basically very very little power in improving that. Situation. I believe that's true for that particular role. I don't want to absolve the Overwatch League in terms of like the content that they could be doing of responsibility, because I do think that there is a bottleneck in terms of the esports content we're creating, and that is limiting the growth of the esports to a heavy degree. I agree the game needs to be made better. That's very true. Like basically the two bolded parts what Brad said here is, and I'll read the sentence for the audio listeners. The league needs a bailout, bold, and the devs need to make the game better, bolded. Okay, so bailout, make the game better. Bailout, that's what we already discussed. Like maybe they can get bankrolled for a season and then the league just has to recoup their own losses based on their ability to sell or whatever they want to do with the you made the bed, you should have figured out revenue, and then make the game better. That's another aspect, right, where like I feel like some of that can come through analyzing the desires of the highest tier players, like what do they want to see represented. Because here's one thing that I noticed in this game.
Okay.
Maybe this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm not sure it is.
Okay. We'll decide after you say it.
We have an unusually low amount of cultural impact from pro players. And the trickle-down effect of everything that the pro play does, it's very slow in comparison to other esports. If we have a meta, it takes longer for that to trickle down. The generation or the rate of generating culture in this game from the pro player base is very slow. Okay, why is that? For one, it is nobody's fucking talking to these pro players about what their core experience is, what they want it to be, how they want to make it more hardcore, how we can, like, why are we trying to protect people's feelings in terms of rank play and getting rid of the ranked anxiety when you should be cranking up the incentive why you should be playing this. The carrot should be harder if you want this to be a competitive title. You willed into this by having a competitive league that is a significant amount, like there's a $500 million on the line, right? Like this is now implicit in your game design. It should be one of the goals, right? So ask them what they would be doing. Some of them are wicked smart about it. I understand that, and we'll get to this. I'm organizing a player panel. I think there's a bunch of hurdles that need to be considered here. But like we need to make the game better. I'll tell you from my own experience, I'm already playing less than I did season 1. That was expected. The amount of which I'm playing less is maybe a little bit more frightening. I feel like that is true for my friend list as well, with dwindling numbers. And we're not even in one of the seasons where there won't be a new hero. That's next season. What kind of content is? I hope like the rate of content is still not where we want it to be. The novelty generation is still too low. We gotta find maybe through balance patches. I don't know what you would be doing, but the novelty generation needs to be upped. Then we can, and I'm sorry, like you can have your little hope fest that some guy that was like ejected into the world in some specific North American location will watch your esport. I want to more reliably try to appeal to those guys that are playing your game, and you increase the number of those guys playing your game, and you make it more desirable by creating a social hierarchy within your game's ecosystem as to why it is cool to be good in this game. And that then funnels into the pro scene. We just do it like everyone else has done. And then we increase the ways in which this becomes desirable through a myriad of ideas. Like some of them are even recycling your own ideas of like tournaments and whatnot, right? Like whatever it is, like there's probably a bunch of ideas that could be novel, could feed into that. I'm sure pro players are also a good source of all of that. If not, this is something that I would echo. This league has an extraordinarily competent bunch of staff that are working behind the scenes as well. Not just inside the Overwatch League, but also in the teams. There's that's the one thing that keeps me bullish is the intellectual capital that we have in these guys. They are like, dude, like some of these resumes read crazy, right? And some of the guys that are going away from this league are immediately joining elite organizations. I look around Google, Apple, like Tesla, whatever, like the hardest companies in the world to get into, those guys get into it, right? We got a lot of talent here. It has to be possible to make a product here with that type of talent. That's the reason to be bullish on this league is the cultural capital or the intellectual capital we have still.
Can I play devil's advocate in that way though?
Sure.
For a moment, because I agree, right? Like after, talking to some of these people and some of them, becoming friends of mine, right? Like I'm very close with Nuki historically, like, check my bias, whatever. Baroy also spent quite a bit of time with him, very, intelligent, these are smart people, 100%. With how we've seen Activision Blizzard, especially in the front office of the Overwatch League, be very like skittish when it comes to like saying anything to anybody at the risk of like anything leaking. Do you think that changes?
That's another
ever,
dude. That's another thing. Like they don't understand. The content is the mess.
Yes.
Okay. That's the mess. Like the COD understands this. Everyone understands this, that if you like almost you want to make mistakes in order to grow. You want to almost sabotage yourself in order to make mistakes that are, I mean, within reason, with repairability.
Yes, obviously.
But everyone, like, failing upwards has never been more efficacious than in these recent times, it feels like.
Yeah.
Right? Like, through outrage, it reaches the algorithms on your social media feeds. And then eventually, if the content is right, people just forget. I'm not, like, once again, don't go to the extremes here, right? Like, what I'm saying is, like, I want, no. What I want is, like, people to talk about player salaries. Figure some shit out, how it's possible to get everyone's salaries. And everyone go, like, why, like, players talk about why the hell am I being paid less than X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that shouldn't.
Like, drama, I'm sorry, this is not great. I would love to just talk about GOATS rotations all day, but like, you gotta tune that. People want the drama. You gotta have the illusion of serious drama. That's the best thing. Or you can have some meaningful disagreements and negotiate through that structure. But to constantly have also, that's another major mistake, by the way, which maybe Brad is also hinting at here. He said that one of the culprits was the season 1 to season 3 all leadership, who made macro decisions that are more or less impossible to walk back. Yeah. One of those is, who am I attracting to my league? What kind of people am I attracting to my league? Who do I want to signal? Who I want to in my league? If the GOAT gets fined for showing the middle finger to the camera, because that's not Disney focused, well, you're attracting a certain type of player, and you're forming young professionals to act in a certain way, and none of that is interesting.
No, it's not interesting, and it also is antithetical to itself, right? When you try to make this T-sports, right? When you want to make it meat sports, but then you also want to Disneyify it, like, you're taking people, which again I think was brilliant, right? I think it was a great, like, step forward in esports to take people who would not be interested otherwise in any kind of video game or esports, tie it to a geolocated model, and say, look, this is the Philadelphia team, Omega Lol. This is the Boston team. This is the Los Angeles team. Come one, come all. We're gonna have some fucking fun, right? Like, those traditional sports heads that are into, like, very general games hear that and they're attracted to it. What they immediately get turned off by is, again, what Brad's kind of hinting at in season 1 to season 3, like the Disneyfication of everything, where, like, nobody can say anything without getting fined. Yes, there are some things that there are lines that you definitely should not cross, but, like, there is just a sense of, like, fun to be had. Yes, sports happens. People talk shit. Let them have their fun, right? Again, very clear lines you should not cross. And if you do, you get punished. But it's antithetical to take sports and then go, but we have to, like, remove any kind of, the flavor from it whatsoever and make it just the most milquetoast thing possible, right? Like, in concept, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
If we wanted to be Disney, let's just be Disney. If we wanted to be T-sports, then just be T-sports. Putting it together ruins the pie.
It's like, you know what the biggest lie of competitive sports is, Joe?
What's that?
Sportsmanship. Sportsmanship is what needs to happen in order for us to be able to walk away alive from the pitch. Everything else that happens on the pitch is dirty as shit. And it's fun.
Most of the time. I agree for the most part. Like, if you think of any kind of, like, traditional sports lineup, some absolutely heinous shit is being said. And that kind of almost makes the undercut of the humanity of it, right? Where, for example, as Yiska was going on his diatribe, I saw on my Twitter timeline, recently there was, like, this big faux pas from I think the Dallas Cowboys kicker, and one of the wide receivers was like, hey, don't worry about it, dude. Like, you fucked up twice, but hey, keep your head in the game. And it was, like, this very kind of, like, funny, but also kind of, like, heartwarming moment, because how much pressure's on the line. How much, flack they got. because they missed 2 kicks. Like it was a big deal, and I think it was trending on Twitter when it happened, and it was like this big thing. But to see that there was like a humanity to it from the team, it almost accentuates it, because you know how cutthroat this can be. Whereas in Overwatch,
you know what would be even better? If they L danced on him missing the 4th. That's just better entertainment, dude. Like, I don't like it either. In my world, this is Yiska's world. The best boxer in the world fights the second best boxer in the world. We don't know who is first and second, and they box. And this is this huge media thing. Everyone pays pay-per-view. It's the biggest fight of the century. Oh my God! Next year, 2 other guys, or maybe the same, come back even better. That's Yiska's world. This is the perfect universe. It's not the one we live in.
Agreed.
What is actually happening is some shit-slinging YouTuber against another is now outselling all of those fights. No problem. Right? Like, we gotta find the middle ground. And I'm not saying, like, fucking WWE this. Don't misunderstand me.
Well, okay, we could, but I don't
I'm
agree
making the point that we're now, like, this is entertainment. I agree that... And it's not even that we need to necessarily do too much. We just gotta unharness a little bit on these guys, right? Like, if you...
And it felt like we were going that direction,
dude,
to be fair.
I will always say, and you know this too, when we have people on, the funnest shit happens before and after the broadcast.
Yes.
If that was content, we would constantly be money. If everyone could talk without the system overhanging them and being scared shitless, this would be way more entertaining. And that's true for every single panel, every single podcast, every single one-on-one interview you do, with few exceptions where some guys are just consummate professionals. And that's also, you also need these guys, because that's the contrast that you're contrasting against, in order to make it special. That someone, like, you don't want everyone shit talking. You want to have a nice spectrum. Currently, you know, like, I don't know, like someone complains very saliently about a format issue, and suddenly they're bad boys of the league.
Yeah.
What? Like, it's just, like, of course, if you don't have a spectrum of, like, drama creating behavior, and that's the bottom line, where someone has a reasonable point to make, and that's your bad boy now, yeah, your shit is boring. It's just the case.
To kind of tack on a good example of this that I saw recently, real ones will remember TLO from the StarCraft 2 days. Shout out to Dario.
This is true, yeah. Already, let's go.
He tweeted out recently, it's funny how almost every esports discovers that at Take TV's Home Story Cup format of pros and casters commentating casually from a couch, but equipped with in-depth knowledge and insights, is one of the best broadcasts to watch. Glad Valorant got to enjoy that too now. Kind of talking about the...
This is, by the way, this is the same... That concept is is co-streaming in the virtual space.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
It is. Yeah.
Right? Like...
Yeah. It's very casual. It's not super suit and tie. You have people kind of speaking their minds within reason. Again, I think everybody here wants to be in the space. Everybody wants to be professionals. But you can't just bear down on people because they have an opinion on something, because they, had a spicy take regarding, a design philosophy, and now you have Team 4, like that can't happen if we want to be T-Sports. If we want to be Disney, then we're halfway there. Then let's just be Disney. But this is a truth that I've seen since... When was Take really hot? When was Home Story Cup, Eric, if you're listening? Is that 2012, 2013?
Something like that.
Is that safe to say?
You're right, yeah.
Yeah, it started about then. Biggest one was the 20th, and it's Dusseldorf, basically.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's a bar. You go upstairs. It's very, like, community-driven. But, again, one of the biggest events of the year, back when StarCraft was, like, the thing that built Twitch, right? You're seeing this constantly kind of resurface, where as you get more casual and you allow, the players to kind of have a voice, and you integrate them into the broadcast, funnily enough, people come out of the woodwork. Why that is, there's probably a few different reasons. But even in our neck of the woods, even within esports, why do you think the desk is the way that it is? Why do you think we are doing the content on the broadcast that it is? Because making it not necessarily as general as focused, I think that's like the wrong takeaway here. But there is part of that to this where it's like you want it to be kind of like this cozy, just co-stream environment that is casual looking, but has these nuggets of truths to the game, and you're allowing these pros to kind of speak on things and giving them the space to kind of speak openly. Again, with professional boundaries set in place, and if you cross said boundaries, you should be fine. I'm not saying that shouldn't be the case. But creating environments for these kids to kind of speak their truth, for lack of a better term, seems to be just continually coming up. And I think Take kind of lit the torch, Take TV that is, and I think Beyond the Summit is running away with it. And I feel like if the Overwatch League is going to take a page out of anybody's book when it comes to the broadcast, it needs to be Beyond the Summit, right? I think they are incredibly creative. I think they do kind of have a finger on the pulse, if you could say that, on what the general esports fan is interested in, right? And it comes through their set dressing, it comes through the content that they create. Everything feels very intentional, and it feels very targeted at who is paying attention to this esport and esports at large. Overwatch League is still living in this limbo, this amalgamation of, yes, we want to be suit and tie and take ourselves a little too seriously, but also we're still kind of playing with popsicle sticks with pros face on them. You know what I mean? Like we live in this weird middle area. And I think, to my greater point, we kind of just have to pick a lane and go with it to kind of differentiate ourselves as a product. And I think we probably reap a lot of benefit from that. To what TLO is saying, I think there is just a better direction to go. I think there is a right fork, I think there is a right path to take. And I think we're halfway there. We just have to kind of commit, it feels like.
You know what just occurred to me as like one outside thinking idea that feels adapted to Overwatch. Of course, like this is a bunch of dev time that would need to be invested, right? But
sure,
what if like we can't expect broadcasting rights? You can still, you should probably just broadcast to whatever platform you have. But what if you really focused on the in-game viewing experience? And you would bring the replay viewer back and you would create parties, okay? Imagine you can create a watch party and then you would just follow the observers of that the Overwatch League broadcast does as well. But let's say either for free or for like a fee, you could switch between the different players. And then if you're in that party of 20, you could say some people will watch the Lucio. And then, because Overwatch is so confusing and some like pog things happen outside the broadcast, the one guy that is on the Lucio will then say, oh my god, like Funny Astro just did something. Did you guys? Oh yeah, okay, the broadcast wasn't on it. Dude, let me tag this. And then once we're out of the team fight, I can pull everyone here to that moment, and we live it together in that break between team fights.
I mean, we kind of had that with the replay viewer. I mean, like we going back to like
we didn't have the like you. How would you? I guess you could have clipped it on Twitch and showed it to people or something like that. Like yeah. I'm not saying that all of this is feasible, but this would be. What I like about that idea is it's uniquely Overwatch. It's trying to fix a problem and crowdsourcing the solution. The problem is Overwatch, a lot of cool stuff happens outside the observer cam. How do you solve that?
Problem. How do we solve it?
We have another problem. We don't have synchronized viewing experience where we could all share that moment. So how do we solve that? We crowdsource the solutions. Now, don't just think about like how you and your group of 20 friends who are adept could solve that issue. Also think how broadcasters and co-streamers could do that. Imagine 5 pros being in a lobby. Everyone is on a different player and goes like, oh my god, here. And you even give them graphical tools within the game. And then they tell you a different story. And you even adapt the game a little bit, maybe a little bit longer respawn time. So times between fights would be different or something like this. And work with the product into that dimension, right? And see where that takes you. That, like, the in-client, let the viewers tell their own story type of thing. I feel like that's one dimension of thinking into the future of entertainment, where that's definitely going to be, the AR type of stuff, like tell your own story, be your own actor in the main storyline type of thing. That's something that feels like it would be forward-facing towards a solution. That, like, I'm not saying it works. I'm saying, like, that's the type of idea that we could have had, because we had the replay viewer, we had the command center. You marry those, you have a cool product. Where's the command center and where's the replay viewer?
Apparently, it wasn't good enough.
Yeah,
I mean, like, that's big picture, and I agree. Like, we need to be forward-facing. I think it's incredibly difficult for the Blizzard side of Activision Blizzard to, for whatever reason, be forward-facing. Again, they've always been I was raised on Blizzard games. They've always been, okay, that is the case, right? Like, even going back to, like, the inception of, like, the Blizzard, like, golden era, when they were, like, polishing the RTS genre, they were polishing the MMO genre, they were polishing the ARPG genre with Diablo and StarCraft and World of Warcraft, right? They take good ideas, they polish them up, and they ship them out. They're very, very good. They've never been very good at, like, looking ahead to, like, where technology and where video games and where, media is going next. I think that's difficult for them. However, a very easy way to make, at least remedy things in the short term, make co-streaming a little bit more incentivizable.
Yeah.
Just gonna throw that out there. We had a co-stream. It was fun. I enjoyed doing it. I think there's a very clear reason why it doesn't make much sense for us to do co-streams, because we can't really even own anything we do.
Yeah.
There's the restrictions when it comes to co-streaming makes it not really worth it in some regard, especially when you have, I think within our Discord community and our community at large, we do have a culture of, like, listening and watching the games together with everybody kind of just, big chaotic mess. So it doesn't make sense for us to want to do that when we have a community built elsewhere to go, party and hang out with them and talk shit, right? It makes sense for some people, and that's great. But when you look at the competitors, when you look at the Riot Games, as much as, yes, Herdider, Riot this, Riot that, their take on things is much different than ours, right? Like, it's a whole program, from my understanding. They actually are given assets to also promote their own co-streams. So everybody's, feasting from the same pie. It's a win-win for everybody, right? Like, you get to draw people to your community, then draw people to the product in some way. Yes, I understand the in crowds worry of monetization when it comes to, like, the co-streaming horizon line, where what happens when co-streams just become the preferred product and the main product becomes kind of secondary. How do you sell how do you sell sponsors? Well, what does that look like? I understand that concern. I don't really have an answer for that. I don't think anybody really does. But it's very clear that is kind of the way forward. So again, how do we kind of marry the two ideas together? We look at something that, funnily enough, we've worked with before. We had Takeover way back when. I believe Contenders had sold some of the broadcasting rights to Take. I think that's, out there in the ether. They've worked with Take before. It's not necessarily out of the wheelhouse. I think there are good ideas out there with Beyond the Summit to kind of, I'm not saying go hire Beyond the Summit to run the Overwatch League, but what I'm saying is, like, there is something to be learned from the less polish sometimes is probably better, right? Sometimes, like you said, you want those faux pas, you want, like, the drama almost, but it doesn't even have to necessarily be drama. You just need people to be kind of open and to have hot takes. Go back to last year. What was everybody's favorite part of the desk literally all last year? The one thing that I can say without a doubt was my favorite part of the desk in I think all of Overwatch League history was Custa's diatribe when it came to the Washington Justice. Right or wrong, that was an impassioned little monologue he had. That was an incredible, and lo and behold, it's at the top of Reddit. Everybody's talking about it. We need more of that. Yes, we also need some brave people to step up and have opinions. Agreed. Sometimes they come by accident. Sometimes they're very meticulously kind of thought out and they have them. That's, I think, the short-term, step forward for at least the broadcast itself. When it comes to like Team 4 and Activision Blizzard, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, that feels hopeless. But something that we can control today, tomorrow, is what the product looks like at the very least. And I think that's, the lesson here is that if we take off our suits and our ties, you get a little bit more brave. You have a little bit more of an impact. You allow the players who I think have only grown in personality, and you give them a platform to speak on that personality. I think we all kind of benefit from it. Yep. So that's at least the product side of things when it comes to the Overwatch League franchises, retaining a lawyer to go after some collective bargaining. I did kind of want to circle back to the main topic and poke you with another idea that, again, we kind of talked about privately, but with this kind of being what feels like a metaphorical straw that's breaking, or at least, cracking the dam, if you will. Does this mean that we don't have a sponsorship, or not sponsorship, but a media rights deal, right? There's no exclusive, is this kind of
CDL doesn't seem to have one. It looks like we don't. Yeah.
That's, again, kind of what I took from it as well. I don't think you hire lawyers on retainer if things are going well and, maybe Twitch is ponying up, or maybe YouTube wants to re-up a deal, or God forbid we go to Facebook, unlikely, right? Yeah. Like, that doesn't seem like that's the case. And if it isn't, then I'll happy to.
It would be a pittance in comparison to
sure, but it also doesn't make sense when, circling back to something you said earlier, when you're talking about even like just Twitch streamers at large, we're hearing a lot of these influencers talk about like how their deals aren't necessarily what they used to be. Yeah. So again, it's a wider issue that isn't just like, oh, boo-hoo, Overwatch sucks. It's like, well, no, like just the landscape's changing. Like it doesn't make much sense for, the economy at the moment to own the exclusive rights to let's face it, a mid esports product. Just isn't, right? Especially like even at the highest level, like one of the most popular games in the world, League of Legends, doesn't, for my knowledge, have an exclusive media rights deal with anybody. Or at least broadcasting rights. No. Media is probably the wrong term. They don't have any kind of exclusivity when it comes to broadcasting.
Because they don't.
That should speak volumes. Is that strategic? Could be. Is that they also don't need to. Agreed. Like it's kind of not a fair comparison, but when that doesn't make sense for them and they see that, there's probably more benefit to not doing that, it kind of, sheds a light that maybe this isn't the right path forward. And we've talked about that in the past. But another thing that Jacob Wolf kind of cited in his report was actually another report, or rather an interview from the Houston Chronicle that I wanted to kind of pick your brain on, to kind of quote Jacob here. Quote, in an interview with the Houston Chronicle on January 16th, the COO of the Houston Outlaws parent company, Beasley Esports, Lori Burgess, spoke candidly about the state of the company's revenue and losses for the Overwatch League franchises. Burgess said that the team pays some players more than $200,000 per year in salary, despite being $1.4 million in revenues stemming primarily from ad sales. The team is still operating at a loss. End quote. What? In what world? Okay, just hear me out. In what world are we retaining lawyers to collective bargain and possibly try to leverage, some extra dollar bills in an esport that isn't making any money, that we're having a hard time selling sponsors on? Why are we still paying players $200,000 per year? Again, players, I'm happy you're getting paid. Don't get me wrong. But how does this make any sense?
Okay, let me steel man that strategy. I think there's a world where they believe like Houston is it's very important to be competitive in that particular local market. Like you need to win the league. or like compete for it. You need to, and also like if they're actually selling 1.4 million in revenue on sponsorship stuff, I'm gonna tell you like that's
not a lot.
It's a banger in terms of like all the other franchises. I think I'd be surprised.
Okay, so you're comparing it to the peers.
I think they'd be very high up there. Maybe that's an entirely uneducated thing, but
yeah, I feel like this is like that compared to their peers, this might be good, but I think at like media at large, I feel like that's really, really bad.
Sure, yeah. I mean, also keep in mind this is one thing that I felt was I'm not sure how much and in what way this interview was held, because it felt like some of those questions and framings in the particular article made no sense to me. They almost actively felt like someone reframed and tried to edit for brevity here and just killed a lot of sense in the process. Like they were talking about how we're waiting for the single player game of Overwatch 2. Like there's no single player game. We're getting a PvE game. That's very different, right? So. And I imagine some of the stuff got lost in translation there. I would think, because some of the stuff is just confusing to me. Let's say the least.
Yes, very confusing.
Right now, $200K per year salary. There are other franchises. At least one I know that there's a player that is making north of 200,000. It's an old contract. To say multiple on one team,
that seems like a lot, right?
That is
is that a possible out though? Like, is there a world where, again, maybe it's like lost on me at the moment because this offseason has been absolute like roller coaster, but is there a world where these are some older contracts, right? I think Pelican, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that he entered free agency, so that probably isn't, a re-up of an old contract. I feel like he's probably on a new contract. Are they just kind of stuck with some juiced contracts from years past that they kind of have to sit on and they don't want to have to pay a buyout for? Like, is that possible? I don't know.
Then they would have to pay a buyout for that, right?
If they wanted to get them on a lower contract, right? But that seems kind of...
No, like if they have old contracts that are inflated, that would mean you would have to buy the contracts out from the other team. That would increase the cost, not lower it, right?
Okay, I see what you're saying. I was thinking more internally, like they retained a player, they were just on a high contract, now they're kind of just stuck with paying a high contract.
Yeah. So I feel like that's definitely something that needs to be considered, and given did Shu still have?
That's immediately who I was thinking. I was like, yo, is Shu getting paid?
I mean, he's getting paid for sure. Like
if there's multiple,
if there's multiple players on your team that are making 200,000, then Pelican needs to be one of those, and either Fearless or Shu needs to be the other guy. If you have three, then those are your three. If you have more than three, if everyone is making more than 200K, right? Like then still like. Probably Pelican needs to be the top paid guy, and then Shu, and then
I don't think it's Pelican. Yes. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me when you have a main tank that just won the league and a flex support that arguably has been top 5 in the last 5 years that both entered free agency.
It's a flex DPS, though. It's different. They always had higher salaries in comparison, right?
They did, but I don't know. I just feel like Pelican, I don't know. That's tough.
I mean, if you don't believe that he's like S tier anymore, which I think
it's not even necessarily skill for me. I do wonder if there is like Pelican just wants to play for Houston, entered free agency just to see the market, and then was like, yeah, there's really nothing here, so I'll just go back for like, a decrease in rate.
I also think like they probably just freed up a bunch due to Danteh leaving the team. I'm pretty sure he was on a fat salary as well.
And we'll get to Danteh. We have have that news in the chamber. Don't worry about that. But Yeah, these numbers for Houston just don't make a ton of sense.
I heard some stuff through the grapevine, and like as I said in the comments, like from what I know, Houston right now would probably be in a tier of their own. I would maybe walk that back a little bit. I'm not sure what Toronto is paying. AT,
sure, but
because that's also a bigger squad, and also they have to put a little bit on top in terms of their in terms of Canadian taxes, and they would also have to like pay the non-competitive tax, so to speak, as like arguably one of the least achieving franchises in the Overwatch League, and they would also have to have won a bidding war because there were.
Was there a bidding war?
I'm not sure if it was a bidding war per se, but I know that 2 other franchises would have probably been interested in Houston, in AT, and that. Was there anyone else? I think it was just 2.
Sure.
So, and then once again, like you can infer. Like, whoever had the money to pony that up, right?
Would it be clear to say that Houston, if we did a budget tier list today, would it be clear, or would it surprise you to see them not in the S position? Right?
Yes.
Like the highest.
They would have to be.
They're clearly.
They immediately, by virtue of having multiple players on 200,000 and having to fulfill the 6-player minimum, whatever they're paying after that already probably puts them pretty close, right? Like just like if I'm comparing to other franchises, like even like the Sparks of the world are no longer there, right? Like so even if we're just looking in the NA region, who I think Toronto would be up there. I think for sure Houston would be up there. I'm not sure if Glad's probably is still pretty high, but probably lower than in prior years. I would think. I think a lot of people would, like said on the panel, they're not top 5. I think some people think that's cap.
It's hard not to think that, but this has also been the same kind of like song and dance that he did with like Justice, right? Like,
sure.
He just, for whatever reason, has like a good strategy about him to want to sell the idea to come play for the system or play in this environment that has all these luxuries, and they don't have to pay necessarily salaries.
Keep in mind that's a big one as well. Like, and that's on top, by the way, for Houston. Like, they clearly say in the interview that they aren't just paying those salaries; they also pay a housing stipend within reason on top, and they're paying food as well, 2 meals a day. Like, it's almost like what, dude, like the stuff you hear in terms of like what the minimum approach now is, it's getting gnarly out there in comparison, right?
It's getting gross,
yeah. So I don't know how it's possible in an environment where what I assume to be the Boston budget, how if you're both paying housing and food, how you have to pay people this much money in order to get them. That's very interesting to me.
Yeah, and you're paying, you're looking at a state that also has historically, and maybe Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, but has historically
tax law,
very
right?
low tax law, right? Like, it's great to live in Texas.
Yeah.
It's great to, I don't know about Houston specifically. Maybe there's some legalese there that I'm not keen on. But I hear Texas is great for, it's no surprise that like streamers are flocking there, and,
Now keep in mind, like, once again, like if something got lost in translation in that particular article where the editor, for instance, didn't know about the legalese or the particular framing of like Overwatch League contracts and all that stuff, and it just like that got distorted, fair enough. Then I have like that. Then I'm less surprised about what Houston is doing. At the same time, like, it feels nice that there's still one island left in the Overwatch League, I suppose.
It is nice. Again, the silver lining here is that at least these kids are getting paid, at the very least, right? It just, I don't know if it's necessarily a great thing when we're talking about, how nobody's making any money and everybody, is struggling to,
I mean, fair enough.
to
If you think you can like pony that up, then you pony that up. And maybe there's some business reason why you're doing that. And I assume we have rational actors in this league. Like there's so many variables that it could be why you're doing
Sure,
that.
could be.
From like trying to say like here's goodwill in terms of we're spending a lot. We were not the problem. Or stuff like I don't know, like we want to win because we know we've talked to our local sponsors. Like if we get that exposure and like maybe we're better at monetizing our deals then.
And to be fair, Houston has had a history of still attracting quite a bit of sponsors. I know that they were,
sure.
I think they were HEB, and they had like the Kovacs, like aim trainer. I don't remember which one it was, but like they've been active where a lot of teams have been like very just minimal in it looks like their efforts have been. Yeah. That's safe to say.
So if
you're also that
like if you're actually pulling that in just team wide sponsorship revenue, heads off. Like someone's doing well in sales there from what I know. Maybe I'm off the mark there, but that seems pretty high to me in comparison, especially in this market, I would say. And good on you that you can afford the team. I would argue you maybe didn't, like, I can understand that you pay out heavy for, I'm about to hot take this. I wouldn't have given Pelican that contract to that
Venture Sweet Ass, you wouldn't.
Especially in a world where profit is still in Seoul and stuff like this.
I genuinely don't know.
I probably drop the bag on Shu. I think it's very hard to find someone that's replaceable in the league. Okay, here's the hot take.
On Fearless.
I don't
either.
I don't.
And I know that's heretical to say.
All that needs to happen is zero monkey metas for some weird reason, and all the additional hard carry value that you're getting from this guy is evaporated. While the guy that won the regular season for them, Hanbin, is still on the other team and is doing all that shit to you. And honestly, he probably won't ever be as good at Winston as Fearless is, but like he probably can get close. I trust
he can get
Hanbin
serviceable to not like feed in like against like his peers, but like 200K for a ball Winston player.
That's crazy if you're getting former Overwatch League winners at not even six figures, right? Some of them.
Yeah, and that's not a good thing either, right? Like you don't want to sign a former champion or a defending champion and not like pay them what they're worth.
Sure.
But if we're going to be realistic about this, it's difficult. And again, we're assuming that maybe Fearless is one of those people that is on, a six-figure deal. We don't know that.
Sure.
But it doesn't make sense. What it sounds like, it doesn't make sense to either of us to also have Fearless on that six figures. It wouldn't surprise me, but if we were GMs, it doesn't sound like we would be doing those deals, right? It doesn't surprise me that maybe somebody did. To those in the know, I don't know that, you would. I think this kind of all circles back the Jacob Wolf report, the growing doom of the esports winter that it sounds like we're approaching. Or that maybe the media winter, who knows? You talk about the Jake Paul versus the God knows what fight, right? I feel like it's hilarious that it was a proud moment for me to see that the RCOW community still remembered that Morgan Stanley report that said that the Overwatch League could make $100 million annually. Just remember those juicy numbers?
Yeah, I mean those numbers were unrealistic. The thing is, like,
I think that's an understatement, personally.
Yeah, I mean it's the thing is, I'm surprised we even got within in order of magnitude.
Yes, I agree.
Right? That
Like,
was always
we have,
like, dude. Once again, like we are talking about how they're not able to sell. Those guys could sell back in the day, right? Like the fact that we got these viewership sponsor or broadcasting deals, man, someone got away with a robbery. Holy shit. Like, especially like on the Twitch side of things, I think heads rolled there. Like,
oh, without it, undoubtedly somebody was fired that, somebody voted yay one too many times on a couple of panel votes, and they might have been, X'd.
It makes
But
some sense.
I don't know if we need robberies. Yes, it's hilarious and like silver linings, like maybe we aren't where we are without it. But I have to assume that is part of what at least Brad is also talking about when it comes to like irrevocable damage that has been done from season 1 to season 3 from the leadership that puts us in a position where we are today. Right? Like, yes, we did do a heist. Let's call it what it is, right? Somebody somewhere did some juicy numbering, sold some sponsors on the back of some questionable numbers, and the tax man cometh and is looking for some cash, and we ain't got it. We don't have a whole lot of anything right now.
Yeah.
And like it's not a good thing. It was cool at the time, and yeah, like week 1 of Owl season 1 was crazy. The viewership was nuts. Even playoffs last year was quite high, right? It was surprisingly high. We do kind of spike every once in a while. We do have these like it factor moments, but we still have to kind of repair some hemorrhaging within the business side of things, because it's not good. None of this is good, and we're still basically under the gun of this report that talks about how we're maybe the league makes $100 million annually, and maybe we can sell sponsors at this much money, and maybe we can get broadcasting deals. None of that shit exists anymore. Like, and I don't even know if it existed at the time. So there is a lot of like seedy lies and like this dark underbelly that this entire franchise system is built on, that we kind of have to not necessarily expose, but because I think they're kind of all out there, but like we have to kind of face brass tacks here and say, look, like we need to course correct. And seeing that Houston is spending this crazy amount of money when we should be course correcting, that doesn't make me feel good.
I mean, it's their money, right? They can do whatever they deem. It's interesting. I would love to really poke and prod at the idea of efficacy of spending like that, because in my mind, whatever you're getting on the roster side, you could have paid everyone like maybe 120.
Yes.
And then whatever surplus you have, you put into content, into all kinds of other stuff, and it's likely to give you more efficacious feedback. But yeah, I don't know.
The only again, like to your speculative desires, it feels like this is a play to win. Again, if you're telling me that you're signing people like Shu and Fearless and Pelican and Happy, and you're spending 6 figures on multiple 6-figure contracts on multiple players, like that signals you're shooting for a title. Anything less than that feels like a waste, and maybe there are some business decisions to point them in that direction. However, again, it feels like a course correction is needed, and maybe there is some safer investments to make, but maybe that's just my ignorance. Anything else from the Jacob Wolf report kind of catch your fancy before we move on?
No, not really. I think we covered it all.
All right. Well, hot topic out of the way. We do have some player moves. A couple of which we kind of alluded to. Prophet has not resigned, but re-signed with the Seoul Dynasty. Will be still playing from home in Seoul, South Korea. I believe am I wrong in saying that's the only known player on Seoul right now?
I think that's true, yeah.
So it's just Prophet. Not bad so far.
Can I make the lame joke?
Go for it.
What does that? How does that reflect on Prophet's legacy? Because, the lame LeBron joke that everyone keeps shoving in that never gets funnier, and like that, seeing that as the top comment always puts you like 5 feet above your body in your non-corporeal form. Like,
Sure.
Here it makes sense because this is the GOAT, I think, by consensus. Most people have him as the GOAT at this point. And that dude is going to a roster that is highly unlikely to pull anything this year, just by virtue of there's only so many good players left, there's only so many rookies left, and it's clearly in the worst region where you clearly don't get the practice quality, where, like, there are some curveballs coming down the pike if those happen, but it's not going to make APAC catch up to NA. And if this guy wanted to absolutely like make sure that he will forever be considered the greatest player of all time in Overwatch, especially considering that this is the last it could be like right.
I mean, it certainly could be at this point.
Yeah,
Who knows?
I'm not leaking, right? Like, once again, this is just like me at 1 a.m. with
this is a doomer brain 1 a.m. Yiska.
One-eyed fucking pirate chatting.
Sure.
But yeah, I feel like that edge that he has on other GOAT candidates is not as comfortably large as to just throw it away in a year in a non-competitive team. It's kind of, to me personally, you know me and Prophet, it's a little disappointing.
I don't know if I would say disappointing. Surprising. Speaks to the character of, I think there is something to say that, just traveling or, knowing yourself enough to know that, like, just going and joining a mixed roster or going and living in the States or in Canada just doesn't, like, sound attractive to you, I think is mature. And if I'm going to be completely honest, and again, this is wild speculation on a team that has exactly one player and a coaching staff, I think there's room for Prophet and the Seoul Dynasty to succeed and for Prophet's legacy to only increase, maybe not exponentially with like a title win or maybe even stage titles. But I think this is the season, at least from the outset, from what we've heard from Arnold in Seoul Discord, where, he's talking about how, things are going to be tighter in budget and, they can't make the moves they want to, yada, yada. When you have a player like Prophet on your team that has shown proficiencies in other roles, I think this is the year. And again, I feel like we say this every year. I think this one really kind of separates itself to possibly see Prophet be a little bit more role fluid. I think this is also partly the reason why I think that, like, his GOAT candidacy probably isn't in a ton of jeopardy. Again, wild speculation, because I do think they're going to, like, really try to utilize him in, like, some big ways, not necessarily the old, like, Chengdu play to your strengths type of vibe. More so, we have this resume, we have this person that has a hero catalog. Why not try, to utilize that, right? What's the harm in trying, because you're already budget as is. What do we have to lose, really?
Yeah. Then again, like, if I could choose where I want him on Boston next year rather than Seoul. Right? Like, as someone that's rooting for sentence. I mean, it's true, right? Like,
well, I know it is true in the reality of 2023, but, like, it's so foreign to me to, like, want to say, like, I want Prophet on Boston next year. It's a weird mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It's not a bad one. It's just weird. I'm just
like, you don't have to learn a new language in order to make that work. Yep. You
playing with
former teammates with people that have a proven track record. You already have that pre-existing synergy from last season with Smurf, who can have your little Gesture, Profit 2.0 duo going in there. You have a great backline.
Yep.
You have a really like solid hit scan, whatever that ends up being. Like, I don't know. This could have been the thing. Like, honestly, like just slot him into the decay space, and it's probably already highly good, like efficacious. I guess there's some. I guess you would structure your DPS line a little bit differently. Let me think. Where else could he fit?
I assumed, I'm going to be completely honest with you, I assumed Glads was going to throw the bag at him. Like, I thought they were just going to approach him with a blank check and say, come on down.
I mean, even like him on Atlanta instead of Stalker, I'm not sure if that's an upgrade for Atlanta. I'm not sure they're not taking that, though. That would also have been great. I don't know. There's a lot of slots like in this league where you don't really have to necessarily adapt much. You just have to, work yourself into a new team environment. You're immediately title contending. You're still the relevant, like maybe even the MVP player of that particular roster. You can rival for an MVP title, a thing you've never gotten in your career other than the Grand Finals MVP. You're not even getting, you barely got close in terms of the votes at all. So, I don't know. I understand, like, it's your career, do whatever you want. I think Prophet has always expressed that he would rather play with people he likes. And that's a fine attitude to have. And I fully respect that. I think there's also something to be said about, like, if this is his last season and he talked about military service, I'm sure, like, Seoul will appreciate that. To have been sort of their player for 4 years. Was it 4?
Since
season 3, right?
Season 3, yeah.
4, 5, 6. Yeah, 4 years.
3 years, 4 years, whatever.
Yeah, that's
give or take.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Is there? It is. Is there a world where you think he considered, or maybe it wasn't even necessarily public enough to players, that Philly was rebranding to the Infernal, and maybe he could have just played for the other Soul team? Like, is that do you
honestly,
think that kind of crossed his mind?
As Infernal, that you almost only do this for a marketing pick. I don't think you necessarily need Profit in that DPS line. I think there's
agreed. I don't think you need him, but
I think there's better choices that you could pick and add. I'm also not sure what their financial situation is like, because I think other than Carpe, that roster was always pretty slim in terms of salary.
Sure.
So I'm not sure if they were willing to give up that much. I don't know.
Here, you ready for my wild speculation?
Sure.
You said a couple of buzzwords, and I want to get your take on this, right? You talk about MVPs. Prophet's never been an MVP. Is he an MVP caliber player? 100%. Does he kind of just fall behind the 8 ball in some seasons because of X, Y, or Z reason? Kind of hard to say no. But there is somebody on the market that has an MVP to their name. They're also a free agent. They've also worked with both Prophet and Toby before. Is there a world where the Seoul Dynasty welcomes home Fleta? Why the exasperation?
I don't know. Who I bring back? Like, I don't know. Toby's playing again, and like, I don't know. Can you dust off the gesture and run it back? I don't know. Like, it's not. I understand why some people would find that fun. I would find fun if Prophet was in would finish the year in a winning team once again. That's my definition.
Sure. Do you think the boat has sailed in that way with like Fleta, where it's like this 2022 is a stark downturn, that there is a trend here. It's not worth reinvesting into, even at like a minimum? Like, is that not like a resume you want just on the kicker?
Depends on what kind of feeling you get from talking to him, right? Like, if he feels once again motivated, maybe has similar thoughts to Prophet, that he wants to, or maybe he has complete apathy and like there's not even a retirement post because like dude just doesn't care anymore, or whatever it could be, right? Like, I don't know. It's really hard. It's also probably exceedingly depressing having to navigate the APAC market. I would imagine.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, I don't know. Like, maybe you can run back some APAC's revival roster. You probably still like get first or second in APAC, depending on what Spark does. But other than that, I don't know. Like,
are we completely? I mean, I feel like you kind of have to. With the whole, Shanghai is owned by NetEase, and NetEase is just the most petty, jilted. I shouldn't point fingers here, but like the whole Blizzard NetEase drama, it feels like a monkey shit flinging contest. We're kind of writing off Shanghai, right? Like, when we're looking at the APAC like preseason power standing rankings projections, like we're not really expecting Shanghai.
Oh, I don't know. Like in my mind, I'm like, why? Like, Moon, why? Like, couldn't you just? Did Boston not ask, or what's going on? Like, yeah, I don't know.
It's tough. It is certainly hard. I mean, Seoul, we'll have to see. Nothing's confirmed just yet. I would probably place like a pretty strong bet on them possibly chasing after Fleta, or at least that was deep in discussions, depending on things that happen.
I think if Ray gets his 6, even if it's really slim,
agreed.
That still slaps the entire region based on who's left. Like, there's like some quality players, like Top Dragon comes to mind, Callan comes to mind.
Apparently, Top Dragon's still looking for, Betty White's out here still looking for a team.
Yeah, Tuyu comes to mind. A bunch of the old London boys that all shaped up over the years. Like, there's still a good team there. It's not a title contending team out there.
Look, I'm here if the Seoul Dynasty wants to throw together a revival roster, where we're picking up Fleta, we're grabbing a Rascal. If Gesture wants to fucking another ring, we sign him up and we just play with the old boys. The little kid inside of me is pogging out of control. I'm here for that, Big ups. If somebody has Godspeed's number, call him up, Time Boy. Anybody, any Time Boy stands in the chat? No, I didn't think so. Moving on to another big move that happened today, as of recording this. Danteh to Glads as a tank player, officially hanging up the sticks when it comes to DPS. Now going to be playing tank. Is it nitpicking to say that the term or the terminology of main tank feels very how to say, like, on purpose? Does that make sense? Does this feel like a Glads is only running Danteh as soul tank and that's it?
Oh, do you mean that?
Yeah.
I don't know. How do I package this? You really put me in a shit situation here.
Here, I'll go first. I think Danteh definitely surprised me in playoffs, right? He was like a saving grace for Houston in a world where it didn't make much sense for him to be starting anyways.
Mm-hmm.
However, not the move I think you'd really want if you're shooting for a title. Is it a very popular move? Is it a very, like, salacious? Like, people are going to be super excited, and people are very excited. Like, people have been asking where Dante's going for a hot minute. I think Glads is a good place to be. I trust Face and Smash to, lead a competitive roster. I just don't know if this team as a whole is going to necessarily compete at the level that they want them to. I could be wrong, but I don't know. What would help me at least fight those intrusive thoughts of like poo-pooing on Glads and writing them in my Overwatch League Death Note. I need to see another tank, right? We saw some good shit out of Danteh last season, surprisingly so. But much like Atlanta, I don't know if we want to rest our hat on somebody that, started their career as flex tank for Arc 6 and then transitioned into being a great DPS player and then coming back and, I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if I'm running those numbers, right? That's kind of my stance.
And I'll give you one more, Joe. I would feel better if we had another flex support as well.
I've been saying that for a minute. Again, I don't think, who was it, Lastro, right? Am I remembering wrong?
Yeah.
I don't think Lastro's a bad player. I really don't. But when I'm looking at what Glads wants to do, and I feel like Glads wants to win, Glads has always been like a team that, pays players well, that wants to shoot for titles. Again, you're famously on record talking about how if, certain things go their way last season, they might actually be in contention for, being the best team last year. Maybe in your opinion, they were the best team last year. I have a hard time believing that they are going to live up to last year's expectations, right? Like that feels hard to me from what I'm seeing today.
That will be hard, just also in contrast to the other teams out there. Dude, like...
Sure.
I'll forever remain that if Shock wanted to lock in, they could have spent enough money to lock it in this year. I think that's one of those years where they had the optionality to just buy championship. With... I mean, I'm saying that, and then I'm immediately walking it back because I'm meta-randomness pilled.
Sure.
But, like...
There's some variance
They
to this,
probably could have assured a title with the highest probability of all time.
Sure. Agreed there.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they had potential access to a market where they could have just, like, assembled an absolute juggernaut of a roster. And there's good reasons why you wouldn't want that, right? It's maybe not good for the league. It's maybe not good for your pocket. It's maybe not worth it. It's all those things, right?
Sure. But it could have happened.
That's not saying like they're not favorite right now. They clearly are. Still, to me, the only team that could come close,
Vancouver, right?
Is
Vancouver Titans.
Rain. So I think it's I don't think you can say Outlaws. This is
no. At least not yet.
In most matters, So I don't know, like Outlaws, I people will remember me saying like this is a weird team. That's a weird pickup, right? It's not an archetypical Gladiators pickup, right? For now, what it looks to steer towards is Lastro has played pretty much all his career in English-speaking teams or hybrid teams. So, like, I count him, much like Faith, to be like a fully integrated
he's
Korean
like
player. Yeah, right? Like
we adopted him.
Right. And then like you have Danteh, you have Kevster. This is steering towards a Western roster, you would think, right? So it's that's why it feels a little weird what's going on. Funny Astro, of course, also like you clearly have the building blocks here for a clearly elite Western roster, right?
Yep.
And if you think about it, okay, let's hypothesize, right? You have Danteh on tank. You probably don't feel great about losing Reiner if you want to have a Western main tank. You probably would have knocked on London's door in order to get Hardy. In terms of the DPS, you have got Kevster. That's the starting block of every elite Western lineup. Then you come to the hit scan DPS, you want Kai. And then for the flex DPS, in terms of Western, do you need another one, or do you just let Kev fuck?
I think you can just assume that Kev in a way is like colorless mana in like Magic the Gathering, and you could just like build around it, right? Where it's just like, all right, what do we have on the market? What is the market giving us? We have a Kai. We have some projectile players from contenders. Cool. Those are those role players. We'll put Kev wherever he needs to be, like we saw him last year with Patty and Ons, and there was multiple opportunities to see mid game Gladiators swap up what Kev was doing at what time, and it felt very much like it wasn't always ideal the way that we would see it, where it's like, okay, if Genji's meta, you need your best player to be on the hard carry hero. Wasn't always necessarily the case that Kev was always on Genji. Sometimes Patty would play it, vice versa. Some Sojourn here, there, Reaper here, there. Like he can do it all. I have full faith that Kev will not be a problem for this team in the slightest. It really is just building out a team that kind of complements him at his level, and I think that's really, really hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the clock feels like it's ticking. It feels like we're finally getting some progress with Lastro into Danteh, and it feels like they've probably locked in their roster at this point, and we probably will be getting more news. I just wonder what that news is, because the players you would assume Glads would be chasing after and kind of foaming at the mouth over, like the Hanbins, the Fearlesses, again, like, looking at the Dallas core, knowing that publicly they were on free agency and they were all allowed to kind of explore their options. Did Glads get any of those pieces? It doesn't seem like they did. So what next? What other Western players are there? For me, at least, I'd like to see Danteh kind of like ease into his first full season as a tank player. Yes, I understand. Like, lol, he played Doomfist all last season. I get it. But like, now he's actively practicing the entire cast for the first time in his career. He's committing to playing tank. I'd like to see that be a hedge bet and not just be the decision that kind of ruins both a storied career and a possible title contending team, because again, they got good bones, but what else does this team look like? It's hard to kind of conceptualize at this point, but
Sure.
We will see.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree, and like that's one of those interviews I'm looking forward to, because I haven't had the chance to talk to Face about this at all either. But I want to just pick the brains and how this offseason went, what the rationale was, and when it's all said and done, just puzzle these pieces together, because of course, like there's budget considerations, there's stuff like goals, like what do you want to have the best possible Western roster? Because keep in mind, like with Atlanta sort of jumping off the Western train, suddenly a lot of agents became free. I think you would have liked to get more of a bite out of that AT squad, but if they really wanted to play together, maybe that's not as feasible. In my mind, this might be a crazy thing to say in 2023. But
are we saying the same thing?
I would have rather had Ultraviolet than Lastro. If you can, like, right? Like, you want Funny Astro. He's the best main support.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like, but yeah.
I don't hate Lastro much in the same way that I didn't hate like someone last year for Florida, where it's like they have a history of both playing in multiple years and working well within a mixed environment. He's basically adopted into like the Western, culture at this point. I don't hate that. I think UV has something to prove. I think started the season last year really, really bright. Ended kind of middling, was okay, kind of forgettable in some instances. Especially, I think, did he play under Vigilante, especially when they got him? Am I high for remembering that?
I mean, he didn't, like, Vigilante played a lot, but he did get some playtime, if I recall correctly.
Okay. All right. I mean, even then, like, trading time isn't necessarily a great thing, but that also probably speaks to
Vigilante. Yeah. Dude, like, this guy's about to be a bench fielder. I'm almost convinced.
I mean, yes, I think there's a reason why, the Justice sat on him, as, the age gate. There's a reason why people were interested in investing in him, right? So there's something there. I don't know if I'd pin that on Lastro. If there are some other Korean signings that necessarily haven't worked within, a Western mix just yet, that maybe is up for a debate whether or not those might work, and maybe if not, is there a Western or at least an English-speaking counterpart that could have at least been comparable? Maybe that's a better debate, but that only, that comes when we see more of this roster, and if there is, another, Korean player that doesn't necessarily fit. But
yeah, sure.
Other than that, we have some NetEase things, but that feels kind of messy to get into, so we'll save that until shit really hits the fan. I think Ray had some public comments about tempering expectations, but that feels, I feel like reasonable people have reasonable expectations for Spark. I think they're, if he attracts the boys he wants, I think they're going to be good.
Yeah. I guess the only other thing that I can think of is the last part of the IoT season was announced.
True, yeah.
That's
somehow, bro. I thought people were high for talking about Isayama rewriting the ending, but at this point, I have to wonder if that's not the case, because this has been dragged out forever.
Yeah.
And because we've reached anime talk, I feel like that's the end of the episode for 279.
Sure.
Anything you've got coming down the pipeline? Anything?
Okay. See here, my content recommendations. Read the article that Eddie Meng put out. It's a really cool, this is a cool introduction into the fundamentals of this league and its issues. I think something like this is a great start-off point to understand what's going on, and some of the solutions that a lot of people, very smart people, have also pushed for. Then and were echoed in the GM panel that I did. Part 1, Part 2. Part 2 brought the spice. I think that's definitely worth looking into as well if you're interested into the business side of things. And then I'm currently working on a player panel. It's not 100% decided who will be on it. Of course, this is always like a time zone negotiation between all the guests. And then also...
Teacher Yiska, I have a question.
Yeah, go on.
How much do I need to pay you to ask the players on said player panel that is coming in the near future? Please like and subscribe to GG Recon's YouTube channel to watch said player panel. Algorithm, please. Hopefully you pick that up. Overwatch 2, loot boxes. How much do I need to pay you to get some spicy comments? I want to hear who's the most overrated player. I want to hear, the private finds that nobody gets to talk about, right?
Okay, so
are we bringing spice?
We're bringing spice, but I think we got to get some shit done. We got to talk about stuff like, what's the relationship between developers and pro players? That's the stuff I want to get into. What are some ideas that need to happen? What happened in the off season? What happened to your salary this off season, guys?
Sure.
How did negotiations go? What do you generally feel about the level of scouting in this league? That type of stuff. We're bringing spice. I'm sure we're keeping it serious. At least maybe in the later parts of the episodes, maybe I'll have everyone riff off each other's chances to win the league, because we got some. I feel like, let me think about this. Danteh is one of them, for instance. We got some people with who are heavy hitters in terms of their ability to really turn some heads this year. Hopefully I can get even more on. And just I try to make sure that I get no double ups. So people from different teams. Currently there are 3 on. There might be as many as 5. We'll see how it goes. It's for me, it's very hard to judge if average player interview answer length translates into average player panel answer length when everyone's having fun or whatever, or what the because it's hard to say, is 3 right, or is that too little and we just through all questions in an hour, do we need 5, or is 5 too much because everyone's just like constantly screaming and having fun and right? Like this will be a challenging one to host. I imagine.
Probably trying to herd cats in some fashion, but depends on who you get. I think there are some people who definitely have
I got some smart
the right
too.
balance. Oh, I'm excited. I still got to catch up on the GM panel part 2, so I'm going to be definitely consuming that after I consume some food after this podcast. Anything else? Any anime? Any I know you're playing Risk of Rain these days. What's going on?
I mean, I'm really trying to play like the game of give me a new eyeball. That's
true. Yeah,
that's the first thing that needs to be fixed. Like this is really, it's not just like a eye thing. It's also fucking with my mental, and it's becoming a problem. I hope I find a fix. Sure. And like gaming, I've been playing some Risk of Rain with fellow Yiska LB. But I also feel my gaming is not really contributing to my L health. So I'm trying to,
that's fair.
Be a little bit more reserved in that. I'll probably have a chill weekend and then start afresh next week.
Sounds good. Much in the same way. Working on me. Getting back into some hobbies. I know I want to start some art projects that feed into some bigger projects that I have for writing. And yeah, I want to get back into talking to some players, but obviously it's difficult because we don't have teams established just yet. And obviously want to bring on some people to the show to pick their brains. We've got some people loaded up. We were gonna have some people all on this episode.
This is not the week where you bring people on.
This is most certainly not the week to have people potentially lose their jobs over talking about what we talked about today. So we again trust and believe we will be getting back to some guests. This one was something for us to kind of shoulder.
It was cathartic. I feel better. I feel at least like way lighter.
Hey, that's good. If this is if this is the therapy episode.
Yeah, let me know what I owe you for this therapy session.
Oh man. All right. We've gone long in the tooth. Yes. Right. Things don't look great right now, but it doesn't have to be necessarily that bad. We've got player movements. We're finally, we're getting into the league. We're getting closer to start time. So we will meet you guys back here next week, same time, same tactical crouch hour to go through God knows what. So 279 signing out. See you next week.
Peace.